Okay, so again, if you hear weird sounds in the background or you think you hear like guitar playing, you probably do. The Hubs is downstairs practicing, and it's like a various mix of video game music and random shit. Just random shit he likes to play. Okay. Hey folks, my name is Jen, and today I'd like to recommend various non-fiction books, depending on possibly what you're into, what you're interested in, that kind of thing. So here we go. So first off, if you are interested in history, specifically the Revolutionary War, I have a suggestion for you. So what I would suggest would be Rise to Rebellion by Jeff Shara. This is, as it says, a novel of the American Revolution. This basically is it's definitely a historical account, but it goes more into depth, and it really treats the various characters, for example, Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and John and Sam Adams, and as well as Abigail Adams. It treats them all like actual characters in a book, and it kind of goes more into depth about their thoughts and feelings and things and conversations that they might have had. So it's almost like not quite a fictionalized history, but it's just more, it reads more like a novel, as it says. It's a novel. It's a very, as it says in the review on the back, an easy intimacy with a cast of characters. I find it to be very interesting. The best reads I've consumed so far about the Revolutionary War, besides Hamilton the musical. It's pretty fascinating, so if you are into the Revolutionary War at all, I would suggest definitely checking this one out. If you are interested in mythology at all, specifically Greek or Roman, I would first of all suggest, of course, Mythology, Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes by Edith Hamilton. This is like the classical book on mythology. It is such a great read. This was actually one of my textbooks for a mythology course I took in college. I fucking love it. My favorite tale is, of course, still Eros and Psyche, but I mean, this is just a pretty great book. It goes into everything, all of the heroes and gods and goddesses, as it says. If you want a little more of an easier intro, or you have kids that are fascinated and you don't think they're going to sit through that particular thick book, I would highly suggest Greek Myths, Meet the Heroes, Gods, and Monsters of Ancient Greece by Jean Menzies and illustrated by Katie Ponder. Not only is it super informative, it's also, the illustrations are fucking gorgeous, and they cover information about the main gods and goddesses. It goes into heroes and everything, and it also will discuss things that are named for the myths and things that are worshipping the gods, how that was back in the day, and different facts and things. It's pretty fascinating. It is a gorgeous book, and yeah, it is pretty great as an intro to Greek mythology. Now, if you are someone who, like me, has a particular interest for things of the paranormal, whether it's just straight up ghosts or really spooky shit, weird things happening, I have a couple of books for you as well. First off, if you are interested in the more ghost hunting practical side of being interested in the paranormal, I would suggest Ghost Hunting for Beginners, Everything You Need to Know to Get Started by Rich Newman. This is, again, pretty great if you are actually interested in ghost hunting or you want to look more into it. This goes into everything you want to know about the investigation, tips for your various audio and video and photography items. It also talks about creating your own paranormal group if that is something that you are interested in. It's a practical guide of being into the paranormal. There you go. Also, if you are looking more for information about specific places. A couple of my particular favorites are Haunted Island, the true ghost stories from Martha's Vineyard, and this is by Holly Nadler. This is such an absolutely fascinating account of the various, as it says, ghost stories from Martha's Vineyard. My husband and I had our honeymoon here, and I actually bought this book on the island. It was really fascinating to read this and then either visit the places the next day or realize after I'd read it that, oh shit, we walked past that house, it was totally freaking haunted. It is great if you live on Martha's Vineyard, you go to Martha's Vineyard, or you're just fascinated with Martha's Vineyard or ghosts on the East Coast in general. If you are a Vermonter or you have a particular love for Vermont or New England, a good one is Green Mountain Ghost Schools and Unsolved Mysteries. This is by Joseph A. Citro, and it is straight up what it says it is. It talks about basically Vermont cryptids, alien sightings, creepy things that have happened, really interesting, weird shit that happened in the past. Like, it's fucking fascinating. If you would prefer your ghost to have a side of memoir, I would highly suggest reading Don't Kiss Them Goodbye by Alison DuBois. Yes, it is the Alison DuBois from the show Medium, if you were a big fan of that show back in the day. This is her real account of what it was like growing up, realizing that she was a freaking medium. It goes into her struggles, it goes into, you know, her painful goodbyes, and also talks about the science behind things and what it's like to deal with living with someone who is a medium. It's pretty fucking fascinating. If you're like me and memoirs are kind of, if memoirs and autobiographies and stuff like that are kind of your thing because you're a nosy bitch, I have several suggestions for that actually. One such suggestion would be to read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. This tells the story of her childhood and growing up in the segregated South when she was being raised by her over-religious grandmother. It is honestly a very tough read. It talks about very tough things in here. Religious zealotry, segregation, racism. There is some sexual assault and rape that does occur in here. It is, as I've said, it's a very hard book to read, and I wouldn't say it's a very enjoyable, though Maya Angelou's writing is extremely beautiful. But it is, however, an extremely important book to read, and honestly, I think that everyone should read this. It is just a very personal account, and I think that not only would it be particularly helpful for a lot of people, I think it's also a book that helps you see a different person's perspective, kind of broaden your horizons and look into what other people in the world have experienced or do experience. If you are looking for some other serious types of conversations in your memoirs, we also have Dreams from My Father by Barack Obama. This is a story of race and inheritance, and I recently talked about this in my wrap-up. This is all about former President Obama's childhood, growing up not only in Indonesia for a few years, but also in Hawaii with his white grandparents and mother, and then also when he was an adult and dealing more with the black community in Chicago, and as well as traveling to Kenya to meet his family. His family, on his father's side, who he hadn't met before. This also talks about a lot of tough topics as well, involving racism, racial tensions, and also a little bit of classism is discussed as well in here. It is a very fascinating read, also another important read, and I think if you are interested in learning more about kind of what got Barack Obama to be where he is with the kind of convictions that he has, this is a good place to see where that kind of came from. If you'd also be interested in learning more about his wife, Michelle, like what life was like when she was growing up and meeting Barack and then going to be like the First Lady of the United States, I would suggest reading Becoming, of course, by Michelle Obama. This was such a fascinating read. I loved the entire experience of reading this. She's definitely a gifted writer. She really makes you feel like you were right there in the midst of her experiences, and especially the pieces about while she and her family were in the White House was especially wonderful and heartwarming to read, even when we were in the midst of not a great time. It was also a little bit bittersweet because of how uncertain things kind of felt while I was reading this, and kind of wishing that we could maybe go back into time a little bit. But if you are interested in learning more about her and about what her life has been like into this point, and want a little bit more of a look at life in the White House from the First Lady's perspective, great, wonderful read. If you are someone who is LGBTQ, or you love someone who is, or you just want to broaden your horizons and learn more about that experience, I would also suggest reading All Boys Aren't Blue, which is a memoir manifesto by George M. Johnson. This covers his experience growing up as an LGBTQ plus person, and his journey to becoming an activist. It deals with a lot of bigotry, not only some homophobia, but also some racism as well, and what that experience is like to be Black and also LGBTQ plus. It was such a great read, and I think it was a very positive read, because a lot of the times I think in the media you see and memoirs and things, you might see someone's only their negative experiences being LGBTQ plus, a lot about not having great experiences with their family. So I think it was a really refreshing to read a memoir of someone who actually has that support from family and friends. I think that's also a positive thing to be put out into the world, a positive thing to see that, that there is, like, sometimes there are good experiences. It's not all a negative experience. But again, this was a very good read. I highly recommend this as well. If you want your memoir type things to be a little more silly, I would suggest basically anything written by Jenny Lawson. Her first memoir is Let's Pretend This Never Happened, and this is just a straight up memoir. This is about her childhood, her weirdness, her marriage, and having her daughter, and also dealing with her mental health issues. This is such a great, quirky, hilarious memoir. It's just absolutely wonderful, and if you really loved that, you might also love Furiously Happy, which is a funny book about horrible things. It's still, again, that same kind of memoir aspect to it, but it gets a little more in depth into quirky things in her life. Again, if you like hilarious kind of oddball memoirs, I would suggest Rhett and Link's Book of Mythicality, A Field Guide to Curiosity, Creativity, and Tomfoolery, and this is by Rip McLaughlin and Link Neal. They were, of course, of Good Mythical Morning fame. This basically covers their entire friendship from the moment they met in like the first grade to just weird, funny shit that's happened in their life, college, meeting their wives, the weird shit that they have done on the internet, creating the mythical society and the mythical crew, what a mythical beast is. There's such really hilarious and funny and at times pretty heartwarming things that happen in here. It is such a great great book, especially if you are a fan of both of these guys. If you would like your memoir to be more like graphic novel-y, perhaps, I have a few suggestions for that as well. One is a book that I've talked about a lot, and that is They Called Us Enemy, and this is by George Takei, Justin Eisinger, Stephen Scott, and it is illustrated by Harmony Becker. This, of course, is a memoir about part of George Takei's childhood, which was spent in the Japanese internment camps during World War II. The illustrations overall are pretty cute. There are, again, some tough topics discussed in here as well, as it does deal with a lot of racism and things that happened during World War II and what life was like for Japanese Americans in the internment camps. But again, I think this is a very important read. I think that everyone should be reading this, especially in the light of bullshit racism that is still happening and getting worse, sadly, at the moment. It is just a great, great read. I highly, highly, highly recommend this. I would also highly recommend Almost American Girl by Robin Ha. And this is about her experience as a young girl from South Korea who was uprooted entirely by her mother and brought to America to live. It also deals with a lot of racism as well, and misunderstandings and various things that happened, and a lot of feelings of isolation, as well as differences in culture, having the culture shock of moving from South Korea to America when not really knowing how to speak English, and also returning to South Korea later and having this weird displacement of being both American and Korean. It's such a great, great read. Just a huge fan of manga, so that is definitely mentioned in here. Drawings are in here. It's pretty awesome. This is just, again, illustrated great, a very interesting story. Great read. And if you are, again, into more oddball stuff that also has a lot of heart, and also that can slip into discussing some tough topics as well, involving like mental health and everything, I would also highly suggest Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Broche. This is her first delving into the memoir. This is unfortunate situations, flawed coping mechanisms, mayhem, and other things that happened. If you've always been a fan of her blog, Hyperbole and a Half, this is just great. It just follows, there's weird ass stories from her childhood, there's stuff about her weird ass dogs, a social situation she's gotten herself in, things that she hates, things that she loves, just really random shit. I think my favorite stories are of her childhood when she was just extremely strange. Also delves into her issues with mental health, which I think is both important and definitely is great to connect with if you are someone who also has had problems dealing, has had issues with that in the past. To this day, nothing quite cracks me up as much as her story, The God of Cake, when she has cake as a small child and flips the fuck out. This is just wonderful. I do have her more recent book that came out recently, Solutions and Other Problems, but I just haven't read it yet. I'm sure that it's probably also going to be recommended as well at some point. But yeah, if you like some quirky, oddball stuff that has a lot of heart behind it, I would suggest this as well. If you like books about specific places or nature and stuff like that, I have a couple of recommendations for that as well. One of my recommendations actually is a non-fiction book about Vermont, and it is Off the Leash. It is Subversive Journeys Around Vermont by Helen Husher. So most people, when you think of Vermont, you probably think maple syrup, cows, the state fair perhaps, getting some cider in the fall and having like cider donuts and all shit like that, Ben and Jerry's, Bernie Sanders. This is what you think about most of the time. This covers places and things that a lot of people might not think of. If you're a little quirky and you want to see more about quirky Vermont, here are some suggestions of places that you could look at. You could look more at the stories about Champ, which is Lake Champlain's own version of the Loch Ness Monster. State. If you're interested in Mormons at all, there's the Joseph Smith Memorial. He actually started in Vermont before he went west. There's things to look at the Bread and Puppet Theater, which is kind of creepy but awesome at the same time. That also, it's more interesting stuff to do around Vermont if you are interested in that at all. Also, if you like to travel around, I would suggest A Walk in the Woods, Rediscovering America on the Appalachian Trail by Bill Bryson. Bill Bryson is fucking hilarious. He has a way with words that is just... I start cackling, man. He's a hoot. This particular book covers a unwise decision to hike the Appalachian Trail. He does this with one of his friends. It's really great, especially if you're interested in the Appalachian Trail and hiking it, but you know that you would probably die or not have a great time doing it. If you are interested in doing it, but you know you're never going to, you should read this book. It also talks a lot about environmental preservation. The Appalachian Trail was kind of created to do that, as well as make more people interested in preserving nature. And this discusses that and also goes into things that have been done and people that really don't give a shit about doing that at all. My one qualm about this book is that it has a bear on the cover. It talks a little about bears, but there's not enough bears in here to suit me, to be honest. But overall, it's a great, funny, wacky journey to take. The last group of nonfiction books that I would highly recommend, if this is something that interests you, would be delving into true crime. So if you are interested in undercover work that's kind of funny but also really interesting, I would highly recommend Black Klansmen by Ron Stallworth. This is an account of the time that in the 1970s, Ron Stallworth, the first black detective in the history of the Colorado Police Department, ended up going undercover in the Ku Klux Klan. How did he manage to do this, you might ask? Well, he went undercover over the phone and through letter writing and whatnot into the Klan, and he has some help for the in-person interactions with another detective who was white. It is the most fascinating story you've never heard of until now. There's a lot of humor in here. It's really interesting. There's some historical bits in here that I had no idea about before, and honestly, this is such a great read, and you should also most definitely check out the Spike Lee film, because it's fucking awesome, and I think both of them go hand in hand. If you actually want true crime stuff that's more into the murdery bits, I would suggest, first of all, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer by Michelle McNamara. This is all about, as it says, Michelle McNamara's investigation into the Golden State Killer and trying to figure out who the fuck this asshole was. This not only covers the past crimes and the history and everything involved, but it also goes into the modern investigation. Unfortunately, Michelle passed away before this book was entirely finished, so there is a final part in here that features new material after that dickwad was fucking arrested. But it's such a great read, and it treats the victims with such respect, and there's a lot of heart in here behind trying to figure out who this was and get some justice for the victims. And there's also pictures in here. I will say, if you are someone who, like me, can't really deal with crime scene photographs, you don't have to worry about the photos that are featured in here. They are pictures of victims and people involved with the case while they are still living. So you're okay. But yeah, if you're very interested in that, or you are very interested in the Golden State Killer case in general, I would highly recommend this. If you like your crime a little more old-timey and mixed in with some historical events as well, I would also highly recommend The Devil in the White City, Murder, Magic, and Madness at the Fair That Changed America by Eric Lawson. This is a two-part crime novel in that half of it is discussing the Chicago World's Fair, which is absolutely fascinating, but at the same time also deals with one of the most prolific evil serial killers that had existed up until that point, H.H. Holmes. This also has photographs throughout here. Thankfully, there is not really anything too disturbing. I will say though, some of the crimes, especially the last couple that he did, involving younger people, there are some details in there that I found particularly troubling. If that is something you think that you would also find troubling, just be forewarned that that is in here. However, again, fascinating read, melding those two topics that were going, these two very specific things that were going on at the same time, melds them together pretty well. Very, very, very interesting. I would highly recommend this as well. So that is it for my nonfiction recommendations. I hope that you found something or several things in there that you would be particularly inclined to read. If you know of any nonfiction books that also deal with any of the particular topics that I discussed, let me know. I have read more nonfiction books other than what is in this video, but yeah, just please let me know down below. I'm always up for new suggestions about things to read. I do have a few other books within those topics as well, but I either haven't read them yet or I don't know, I enjoyed them, but it's not something I would recommend to everyone. Also, if you have any other particular nonfiction books that are your favorites or involve different topics that you are interested in, let me know down below as well. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys, and see you next time.